Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. For centuries, stories of wolf like creatures walking upright have circulated throughout folklore, regional legend, and whispered warnings. Werewolves, devil dogs, shapeshifters. Tales are often dismissed as superstition or fear driven myth, but legends do not endure without cause. Now, in the modern era, reports of upright canine entities have not faded. They have intensified. Witnesses from across the United States and beyond continue to describe encounters with massive, intelligent, wolf-headed beings that move on two legs, display advanced awareness, and in some cases confront humans directly. Tonight's presentation focuses on the most dangerous category of these encounters. These are not distant sightings at a tree line. These are not fleeting shadows or ambiguous shapes. These are incidents involving close proximity, escalation, and real physical danger. In several cases, witnesses survived only because of instinctive reaction or because something chose not to finish what it started. Now, the reports you're about to hear span more than a century. They occur in urban centers, state forests, private homes, and isolated wilderness. What unites them is not fear alone, but intent, restraint, and the disturbing realization that these entities appear to understand exactly what they're doing. This is Cryptid Canine Danger, encounters that nearly turned deadly. Now, our first encounter establishes a pattern that will repeat throughout this presentation. Sudden appearance, extreme confidence, and a complete disregard for human presence or safety. In the early morning hours of 1981, sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., a 24-year-old witness was driving his Dodge Charger along a ramp leaving Route 702 in northeast Baltimore suburb of Essex. The ramp curved west toward Eastern Avenue, and on the right side there was a small wooded section separating the road from a shopping center behind it. As the witness traveled roughly 30 yards down the ramp, something burst out of the tree line to his right. At first, he thought it was a dog. Instinctively, he slammed on the brakes, fearing he was about to run over an animal. But what happened next defied every expectation. The creature did not slow or hesitate. It accelerated, jumped, and sailed directly over the hood of the car, clearing it by at least a foot. For a split second, the witness was convinced it was coming through the windshield. As it passed over the vehicle, he had an unobstructed view of the left side of the creature. It was massive, jet black, long. He would later say it looked nearly as long as the width of his car. He noticed tufts of hair standing up from the top of its ears. And then he saw its face. The creature was smiling. He saw rows of teeth and long fangs. The expression was not animal panic, it was deliberate. The thing landed on the left shoulder of the road and disappeared into the tall grass as quickly as it had appeared. The witness sat frozen, heart racing, overcome with a visceral sense of dread. His immediate thought, one that stayed with him for decades, was that he had just seen pure evil. Years later, when he encountered images of dogman-type entities, he realized with shock that is what he saw, and it matched those descriptions almost perfectly. Now, vehicle interference is one of the most serious escalation indicators in cryptid canine reports. It demonstrates timing, spatial awareness, and the complete lack of fear of fast-moving objects. Similar encounters involving pacing vehicles, blocking roads, or leaping near cars have been reported throughout the Midwest and Appalachia. Now, if this were an isolated event, it might be dismissed. But the next encounter takes us decades earlier into rural Maryland, where a child encountered something upright, silent, and watching. Now, children often notice what adults overlook. Now, in this case, the witness would spend more than 60 years trying to forget what he saw. This is Middletown, Maryland, between 1960 and 1963. Now, in the early 1960s, a young boy spent summers at his grandmother's rural property along Shank Road in Middletown, Maryland. The home had limited electricity and no outdoor lighting. At night, the surrounding land was dark and quiet. Late one night around 3 a.m., the boy, ventured outside alone to use an outhouse located far from the main house. The night was unnaturally silent. No insects, no owls. After leaving the outhouse, an overwhelming sense of being watched came over him. He began running back toward the house, then slowed, compelled to look behind him. Crossing the backyard near the garden was an upright, fur-covered creature with a wolf-like head. It had arms that ended in clawed hands and legs bent backward like a dog. As it turned its head toward the boy, its eyes reflected yellow in the moonlight. The creature did not chase him. It walked calmly across the yard, crossed the gravel lane, and disappeared into the woods. Now, the boy never told anyone. When he eventually did years later, he was mocked and dismissed. Now, Western Maryland has a long history of upright canine reports associated with the Dueo. Historical accounts include stalking behavior, aggression, and territorial display. The calm, deliberate movement seen here aligns with later dogman reports across Pennsylvania and the Midwest. Now, restraint is a recurring theme, but restraint does not always hold. Our next case shows how quickly an encounter can escalate when fear enters the equation. Now, group encounters are rare. Aggressive group encounters are rare still. This was Rothrock State Park in Pennsylvania in 2019. On March 30th, 2019, three couples were hiking in Rothrock State Forest near Pine Grove Mills in Center County, Pennsylvania. It was early afternoon between 1 and 1:30 p.m. As they approached a small clearing, a large wolf-headed creature stepped out of the woods and stared directly at them. When one woman screamed, the creature immediately reacted. It took several steps toward the group, baring its teeth and growling. All six witnesses described it as 8 to 10 feet tall, with a massive wolf's head, yellow eyes, long muscular arms, and legs that did not resemble any known animal. The group literally ran for their lives. Now, this encounter occurred within a region known as Lichen Loop, an area associated with repeated upright canine sightings. Direct advancement towards a group suggests territorial defense or intimidation rather than curiosity. Now, territorial behavior becomes far more serious when it follows people home. Home is supposed to be the final boundary. Again, we're in Maryland, Clarksville. It's 2021, early. A retired Baltimore Police Department detective was working in his home office near Clarksville, Maryland, when he heard heavy impacts outside his kitchen door. When he opened the door, he was confronted by a towering upright canine standing roughly 7 feet tall. The creature lunged. He slammed the door shut and retreated, drawing his firearm. Moments later, the creature forced its way into the house, rampaging through the kitchen and dining room. Glass shattered, furniture was overturned. A strong sulfuric odor filled the air. The creature made eye contact before fleeing. Forced entry into a human dwelling marks a severe escalation. Now, this case demonstrated strength, intent, and the willingness to cross established human boundaries. Not all danger comes with noise or violence. Some encounters are quiet, controlled, and psychologically devastating. Now, every dangerous encounter announces itself with violence. I'm saying not every dangerous encounter announces itself with violence. Some unfold slowly, deliberately, and leave the witness questioning whether the threat ever truly left. It's Columbia, Maryland, at Strawberry Moon standoff in 2024. In June 2024, during the Strawberry Moon, a woman living in Columbia, Maryland, stepped outside her home late at night to let the dogs out. The neighborhood was quiet, suburban, and familiar to her. At first glance, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. She noticed what she assumed was a deer standing at the edge of the nearby field, but then it stood upright. The creature rose smoothly onto two legs, revealing a tall, pale form estimated at 7 to 8 foot tall. It had disproportionately long arms that hung past its waist and a narrow torso. Its head was canine-shaped with large amber eyes that reflected the moonlight. The entity did not vocalize. It didn't move toward her. It just simply stared. The witness described the sensation as being evaluated rather than observed. A deep, instinctive fear took hold, and she immediately retreated into her room, locking the door behind her. But moments later, she heard the doorknob turn. The handle rattled once, then again, as if something were testing it. There was no forced entry attempt, no scratching, no sound of retreat. After several seconds, the pressure stopped. The witness remained inside for the rest of the night, convinced that whatever had been outside understood exactly where she was. Now, door testing behavior appears in multiple upright canine reports and suggests intelligence, curiosity, or territorial probing. The lack of forced entry may indicate restraint, reconnaissance, or an aborted escalation. But when children are present, restraint takes on a far more disturbing dimension. Before we talk about the following report, if you're enjoying tonight's presentation and want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Phantoms Monsters Radio. It really helps us reach out to more people who are searching for answers about the unexplained. And make sure to click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our live shows. Parents experience threats differently. Instinct overrides reason. Again, we're in Maryland. Rock State Park. A mother and her child. This was 2021. In the summer, a mother and her young child were hiking at Rock State Park in Harford County. The area was wooded but not remote. The families were known to frequent the trails. As they approached a bend in the path, the woman noticed movement ahead. At first, she believed it was just a large dog, but then it stood. The creature rose onto two legs, towering above the brush. It had a broad chest, thick limbs, and a wolf-like head with upright ears. Its eyes reflected yellow in the filtered sunlight. The child froze. The creature took a single step forward. Without hesitation, the mother grabbed her children and ran. She didn't look back. She later stated that she felt with absolute certainty that if she had hesitated even briefly, the outcome would have been catastrophic. They reached their vehicle without incident, but the feeling of being watched did not fade until they left the park entirely. Now, protective flight responses are common in cases involving children. Notably, the entity did not pursue, which may indicate assessment behavior rather than predation. But while modern encounters dominate contemporary reports, history suggests this phenomenon is far older. Urban environments have long suppressed uncomfortable truths. I take you to New York City, near Broadway, in 1911. A police officer patrolling near Broadway in New York City reported an encounter that would later be quietly removed from the official discussion. Late at night, the officer observed a tall, upright figure crossing the street ahead of him. Now, under the gaslight illumination, he saw that the figure had a head of a wolf, a fur-covered body, and walked upright like a man. When the officer called out, the creature turned, revealing glowing eyes and bared teeth. It then fled down an alley and vanished. The report was filed and promptly dismissed. No follow-up investigation occurred. Early 20th century urban encounters were often suppressed to avoid public panic. Several similar reports from New York, Chicago, and Detroit exist in archival newspapers. Now, over time, some encounters escalate beyond observation. Now, physical confrontation is rare, but survival is rare. This is Greene County, Pennsylvania, where there's a hand-to-hand combat. In 23, a man hunting alone in rural Greene County, Pennsylvania, encountered an upright canine at close range. The creature charged. The witness stuck it with its rifle, which shattered on impact. The two became locked in a brief physical struggle before the creature disengaged and fled into the woods. The witness sustained injuries consistent with blunt force trauma and claw marks, and he never returned to the area, though he lived nearby. Now, confirmed physical engagement places this case among the most dangerous on record. The creature's decision to disengage suggests either injury or restraint. Now, danger multiplies when multiple entities are present. Pack dynamics introduced unpredictability. We're in Rogersville, Pennsylvania, where a multi-entity porch encounter ensues. It's 2011, and a family in Rogersville began noticing large canine figures moving around their property at night. One evening, multiple upright forms approached the porch. The family observed them from inside as the creatures circled, sniffed, and vocalized. They did not attempt entry, and the family abandoned the property shortly thereafter. Now, multiple entity encounters suggest territorial occupation rather than random movement. Vocalizations may indicate communication or coordination. Isolation removes even the illusion of safety. But the wilderness offers no witnesses. We're now in Media, Pennsylvania. It's 2019. A man camping alone was awakened by heavy footsteps around his tent. The tent collapsed inward as something pressed against it. The witness could hear breathing. After several seconds, the pressure stopped. Whatever was outside moved away. Now, no tracks were found the next morning. Tent assaults represent boundary testing. The lack of physical evidence is consistent with several cryptid canine encounters. But predation does leave clues. Violence is sometimes discovered after the fact. Beauregard Parish, Louisiana. In west central Louisiana, a landowner and his young daughter discovered a dead 90-pound bobcat along the driveway. The body appeared crushed with no signs of feeding. Moments later, the massive upright canine emerged from the tree line. The creature advanced, then retreated when the child screamed. The family fled. Crushing injuries without feeding suggests dominant killing. The presence of a child likely altered the outcome of the encounter. But some warnings come at the last possible moment. And final escalation is often abrupt. Take, for instance, this case in Michaud State Forest in Pennsylvania. It was 2019. A woman camping near Dead Woman's Hollow in Michaud State Forest observed yellow eyes watching her from the trees. The following morning, while investigating disturbed foliage, something significant charged toward her from the woods. She ran for her life, reaching the cabin seconds before whatever was pursuing her would have emerged into view. Charging behavior represents the highest escalation short of physical contact. Witness hesitation often results in injury. Now, across every case presented tonight, the same patterns emerge: intelligence, awareness, assessment, and restraint. These encounters are not chaotic. They're not random. And they are not the result of startled animals reacting instinctively. Again and again, witnesses describe the same unsettling realization. They are being watched, measured, and evaluated. In several cases, the entity could have escalated further. It could have pursued. It could have attacked. Instead, it paused. It advanced just enough to establish dominance, then stopped. That restraint is perhaps the most disturbing element of all, because restraint implies choice. Time and again, witnesses survived not because they were faster, stronger, or more prepared, but because something made a decision to disengage. That decision was not made in panic. It was made calmly, deliberately, and with apparent awareness of consequences. These beings demonstrate spatial intelligence. They understand boundaries. They test doors. They approach homes. They move with purpose. They appear in places where humans feel safe, not only in deep wilderness, but in parks, neighborhoods, campsites, and city streets. Equally important is what they do not do. They rarely vocalize unnecessarily. They seldom leave tracks. They do not linger after exposure. When they move, it's efficient. When they retreat, it's controlled. This suggests something far removed from folklore caricature. These are not mindless monsters or supernatural phantoms acting without agency. Nor do they fit neatly into known biological categories. Whatever they are, they exist at a threshold where intelligence, predatory instinct, and environmental mastery intersects. If upright canines exist, they are not relics of medieval legend. They are not exaggerated bears, wolves, or feral dogs. And they are not simply misunderstood wildlife. They're something else, something that appears to understand us. And perhaps more unsettling still, something that appears to understand when to let us go. Because in every one of these encounters, the witnesses were changed. Even decades later, the memory remains vivid. The fear is not abstract, it's precise, it's embodied, and it's remembered in detail. When these entities choose to be seen, the encounter is never fleeting. It's never easily dismissed and leaves behind a question that cannot be answered with comfort or certainty. Why that moment? Why that person? And why did it stop? Those questions remain. And until they're answered, these encounters cannot be safely relegated to myth. They remain warnings. Now, you have had experienced anything like this or had an unexplained encounter or sighting, you can send your reports to Phantoms and Monster. And as always, thank you for listening. So let's go ahead and let's start the Q&A. Please type all your questions in caps, and we will try to answer them for you. I guess Kevin's having trouble getting the questions up, so I'll try and go through them here as I... Oh, here we go. Dagnabbit. Have you heard of any footprint cast of dogmen? Yeah, I have, and I have seen a few. I have seen a few that are so large it just cannot be the regular wolf. I saw one not too long ago from Pennsylvania that was as wide as a full-grown man's hand and almost as long as a human, a full-size man's foot. I think these things are out there. I've never seen one, but I've heard so many stories over the years. I believe they're definitely out there. Can Squatch. Have eyewitnesses reported the dogman with canine paws or just raccoon claws, human hands? There have been some with human hands, and there have been some with large canine paws. As far as the size of a raccoon, no, but I have seen one cast from Alabama that had very long fingers with claws on the end of it. So, yeah, just like anything else, just like with Bigfoot, I believe they are races of these beings. I've heard of all sizes and shapes and everything as well. So, yeah, I mean, they do come in different shapes and sizes and actually had different behavior. But, yeah, I have. Jose Sanchez, I wonder which move faster, dogmen or low crawlers? Probably the dogman. Um, most witnesses I've talked to who saw charges or saw them leaving describe them as almost moving like they're running above the ground. I mean, almost like they're suspended and moving quickly. I had one guy even tell me years ago of a Rougarou sighting where he thought the thing, he could hardly even see the shape of the creature. It was moving so fast. So they do move. There's no doubt about it. And many times they're up onto the and standing in front of the witness before the witness even has a chance to react to it. Jose Sanchez, could Dogman be more closely in size and weight to say a large male lion? Oh, I'm quite sure. I've heard of these creatures being the size of a full grown lion. I mean, just like the first case where the guy said this thing jumped over the hood of the car and was as long as the car was wide. That's pretty big. So yeah, I've heard a lot of different size descriptions, but I'm quite sure they could get that big easily. Paula, New York City. Lon, what are your thoughts about the Land Between the Lake incident years ago? Real and covered up or just made up? You know, I've heard a couple versions of the story. I read the original story years ago. I even posted it a while back. I do have some questions about it, and I still do. I did back then, and I still do. Um, it just seems to me that if there was, if this thing had attacked these people and mutilated them as bad as it was mentioned, that there had been much more said about it, and it would have been a better record of it. I just don't. I just find it hard to believe that it's so steeped in possible folklore, steeped in a lot of speculation. I would think something like that would definitely grab some interest and be looked into and reported more evenly. But it is what it is. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of the LBL. Frogs amok. Have you had reports of Dogman actually speaking out loud with language, not telepathy? Um, the witnesses I have come across, and even some that had sent me things where I haven't talked to them, I had never really heard of one of these creatures actually communicating vocally, though, and using a language that the human would understand. Many times they do kind of mutter like they're trying to say a language or even mimic a human. We've all heard about Bigfoot and other creatures being able to mimic human language, pale crawlers in particular. Um, I don't, I don't really recall one, and I would have remembered that. For the most part, many times when there is an encounter, a close encounter with one of these creatures, they hold their ground, but they don't. They very rarely lunge or attack. I guess seeing them is intimidating enough, and most people who do see them usually back off, even if they're armed. So, I just can't recall any of these creatures trying to communicate vocally with a human. Audacious Amber, Lon, did you know about the 2021 Prospect Mill case? I don't recall that. Maybe if you send it to me and go into more detail, I might recall it. But no, I don't remember it. I don't remember even faintly. Can Squatch, what percentage of Dogman sightings do you think are misidentified Sasquatch? It could be a lot. Yeah, it could be actually be a lot. There are times you get reports when you look at the report and you're not really sure what they're describing, and I don't think they really did either. And if they are, if they did encounter a Bigfoot and it had maybe a smaller snout on it or something, or tipped ears, or it could easily be misidentified. And I have seen some cases where they could have easily been misidentified. Jose Sanchez reports a dogman running up next to cars at 60 mile an hour. Any idea for how long they've lasted at that rate? I have heard a few where they lasted a pretty good distance, maybe half a mile, maybe. Usually what happens is if they do catch up to a car, I don't know what the intention is, either just scare them or just to act out somehow. But most times when they do catch up to it, they don't stay alongside long. They usually veer off into the woods or off into a field somewhere. Can Squatch, do you think that dogmen are interdimensional or have spiritual aspects like Sasquatch? Oh, absolutely. I think they're definitely interdimensional. Or they have the ability to move in and out of this earth plane. Of course, we have no proof of that. But the fact is, again, just like with Bigfoot, we don't have bodies. We don't have the amount of physical evidence to where we could actually prove either way. But I personally believe that they're interdimensional or able to move or within dimensions or through gateways and such. After you do this a long time and you see that there's just not enough evidence showing up in comparison to the amount of reports that people give, there's something to it now, or something supernatural about it. So that's what I base my theory on. So it is what it is, but maybe we'll find out one day. Dagnammit, do you think prayer helps when you see a cryptid and it sees you? I've talked to people who swore that when they said prayers, that it would usually back off. I've heard that with all types of creatures, even alien beings, But, under the circumstances, it could have been anything. The fact that a human would be fearful and then maybe close their eyes and start praying would kind of throw these creatures off and thinking, not knowing what to expect and expecting either somebody running away or reacting somehow else other than just staying there and praying. I really don't know. I guess you would have to talk to someone who's faithful enough to believe that it worked. Do they mind speak? Amy Crew. I have heard some people say they do. Especially hunters who are armed and come across one of these beings. And they describe sensing that it's trying to communicate with them, and many times they get a small message or an instinct pops in that you got to back off, but it's more than just an instinct to run. It's deliberate, and they usually just back away and nothing happens. And most times these creatures just back away from them and just take off. Jose Sanchez, what have dogmen been seen eating? Most carnivores are omnivores as well, like bear. The most I have heard from witnesses are roadkill feeding, where they're on the side of the road or they see them picking up a carcass and running into the woods with it. Now, when they're out in the woods, it's very hard to even, walk up to them, and they usually can smell them or something, and they take off. But if you're in a car and you come alongside one of these things, hunched down and feeding on it, it's usually roadkill. But apparently, they do eat. Can Squatch, do you think the dog man has the intelligence of a Sasquatch? I have no idea. I really don't. They do have some intelligence, but I think maybe in different aspects, different ways they go about, showing their intelligence. If they're related to regular canines, maybe they possess a sort of intelligence that you get from certain dogs. But I have I have gotten statements from people saying that they do seem to have that human-like quality to them. And I've heard it with Bigfoot too, but probably more with cryptid canines. Sean Simon, Lon, do you think the creature Bigfoot that you saw escaped the government facility was chipped considering how quickly authorities showed up? Yeah, this is a 40-year-old problem I've had, 45-year-old problem. I personally believe they caught this thing. I think it was an escaped creature from some facility that had been in the area. When you live in the Baltimore, Washington area, like I said many times before, there are a lot of facilities that you really don't know what it is. And the way they came up on this thing so quickly after I had made my report, it makes you think that they were definitely looking for something. And of course, there had been a sighting just a few hours before I had mine, probably the same creature. And they were out looking for it. And as soon as that radio alert came out after I had called the Sykesville police, that Maryland State Trooper was there. I mean, he was there within 5 minutes. So, yeah. And they were too cautious and too excited from what I saw to not know what they were dealing with. Paranormal Portal. Do you think this is a surviving example of a synopsis? Yeah, I can't say it. A dog-headed man from Greek legend. It could be. It very well could be. When you start dealing with folklore and legends and such that come from stories, poems, and such from centuries ago, it's hard to realize what it is. And even if the legend is true, if there's something to it. But just like everything else, yeah, I believe it could very well have been something close in nature to those creatures. But it's all speculation and conjecture on my part to say that it is, really. Sir Wolf, do you think some are skinwalkers? Probably not. Skinwalkers aren't really shapeshifters per se. I mean, they don't turn into dogs. They don't turn into other animals. They do change their physicality and their mentality because they're witches, basically, and they have some way of changing somehow. But it's not like they turn into a full-blown dog man or cryptid canine or any other creature. And that fact alone is probably what scares people more than anything else, especially the Native Americans or Native people the Navajo, the Hopi, and those who have dealt with these legends throughout their life. So, is it could it be mistaken for a skinwalker? I think it could, but I think if you got a very good look at it, you would realize that it's probably a human at some point. Um, I I don't know. That's the only way I can answer that question. Anything else? Well, folks, I want to thank you again for coming on tonight. Now, I will tell you, early Thursday morning, late Wednesday night, I'm going to be on Coast to Coast this coming week. So if you want to catch me on there, if you're in the East, it'll be 3 o'clock in the morning, but it'll be my 10th time on there. So we're going to be talking about a little bit of everything. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to have two of my colleagues on from Jersey Shore Entertainment, where we're going to be talking about Jersey Shore Entertainment and what's in store from Phantoms and Monsters down the road. We got a few projects we're going to look into, so we're gonna talk about that. That should be an interesting conversation. That'll be on the 14th. That'll be the Wednesday after next. And I do plan to have an Ask Lon member show, probably the 21st, which is another Wednesday. So I will keep you informed. You will know about it. So until next week, and until I see you again, just stay aware, stay safe, and as always, keep looking into the unexplained. Have a great weekend, and good night.